Welcome everybody, all the regulars and many new faces, which is great. You're all helping to keep us going with your memberships and donations and one-off payments. So thank you very much and welcome. We're very pleased to welcome Janet Lancaster. She's a member, although she lives in the Chilterns, and she's a good friend to the Society. Amongst other things, she's helped us to set up our summer butterfly transects. She was a regular on our long weekend trips with her guitar for the evening entertainment, and she's spoken to us before, and we're very pleased to welcome her back. Tonight, Jan's going to tell us about her trip to the Himalayas in search of snow leopards. So welcome, Jan, and over to you.
Okay, good evening, everybody. Thank you, Nick, for that nice introduction, and thank you, Jan, for inviting me. I think I should have been here in person or down with you in person about 12 months ago, but something got in the way. Anyway, so new technology, same sort of talk, but slightly different circumstances. What I'd like to do tonight is tell you about a part of the world that I've got to know really quite well. I was acting as a volunteer for a small charity, helping people in a very remote valley in the Indian Himalayas, and that's the Spitty Valley. And I visited the valley 10 times over a period of 24 years. I would like to share some of my memories and knowledge and images with you, and also talk about some of the wildlife that I saw, and also the quest for the snow leopard. I'll just leave it at that as a quest. Right, so here we go, share screen. I'd like to talk to you about, it's a remote valley. It's inaccessible for 8 months of the year. I'd like to talk a little about the people and their traditions and their way of life, their religion, as well as their temples and monastery, and also, as I said, the local wildlife and the quest for the snow leopard. I'll also explain a bit about the charity that I was working with as a volunteer and what we actually achieved. Now, whereabouts in the world are we? So we're in India. It's not Nepal, it's India. It's Himalayan India, Northwest Himalayas, and it's right on the border between India and Tibet or China. And that area in red that you can see, that is the state of Himachal Pradesh. To the north, you've got Kashmir and Ladakh. Further along the Tibet border, you've got Arunachal Pradesh, I believe. Then you have Nepal here, and that is Bhutan. So we're right on the Tibet border, and that is part of the problem in terms of why this valley is quite remote and why I was involved in the charity. That part of India was basically annexed or, well, say cut off from the rest of the world politically in the 60s until 1992 because of border problems with China. It's also, as I said, cut off from the world for about 8 months of the year because of the high passes. But how did I get involved with this particular part of the world? I'd been on a holiday to Tibet, and we had a reunion actually at the Holiday Inn in Leicester, would you believe? It was like Lhasa, and we were stayed at the Holiday Inn in Lhasa. So we had the reunion in Leicester, at the Holiday Inn in Leicester. And the tour leader was there, and she, a few months earlier, had met up with a surgeon in the one of the hill stations in India, in Manali. And he talked to her, she used to be a nurse, he talked to her about people in this Spitty Valley and how he had just visited that summer. It's when the valley had opened up again, to tourists. And he just visited and he did a slideshow similar to this with photos of the area. She had always heard about this area of India that had been closed. She would have loved to go. He said, well, the actual medical conditions of the people there are absolutely horrendous. There's no medical support at all. It's a 2-day drive or a 5-day ride on a pony to leave the Spitty Valley to get to a decent hospital. If you can help me raise the money for a hospital, I will organise with the local people to build it. So first visited in 1993. There was a group of us that had been to Tibet, and we went this following year to the Spitty Valley. The charity, Spitty Projects charity, was set up in 93, and there's been ongoing work there. Now, if I can just describe the journey into the Spitty Valley. As I say, you get to Delhi, you stay overnight, you then get the early morning train to Chandigarh in northern India. That takes most of the day. Then a lovely Jeep driver meets you and takes you from there. And it takes 2 days over high mountain passes, which are only open in the summer. Now, Nick, you gave a talk very early on about your walking trip, I believe. And you might recognise some of the roads or not. On the first journey in 93, that was our transport, and that's the rugged terrain that you have to go through to get there. The Himalayas, if I could just say, you think the mountainous, you think it's solid rock, but actually a lot of it is just crumbling and falling apart. And on that first journey in 93, there was considerable amount of road clearing by members of the group. There were 13 of us, a driver and a helper and a camp cook and his helper as well. So I think it was about 19 in total. That is on the second of the high pass that you go over to get to the Spitty Valley. The first pass is the Rotang Pass. The second pass is the Kuzumlar. And if you do a right turn over the Kuzumlar Pass, you get to the Spitty Valley. If you do a left turn, I believe you go on Nick's adventure that he did way back when. So Nick, you might actually recognise that. More Tibetan prayer flags. Maybe now than before. Glaciers around you and mountain peaks all over 20,000 feet. You're then in the rain shadow. You're over the one part of the Himalayas and you start to descend into the Spitty Valley, which is generally about, the valley is about 10,000 feet above sea level, often 11,000 or rising. But it's a mountain desert. So it's quite interesting because usually if you're traveling in the summer, you've gone through the heat of Delhi, the monsoons of the hill stations, and then you're in completely dry desert landscape. Also in the winter, very little snow as well. So it's quite interesting. In terms of vegetation you tend to get just by the water sources, as you'd expect, by the rivers or by springs. And you come across small villages, usually they're located near a spring, as you can see this one, and this is in the Pin Valley. As I say, I've been there 10 times and it's quite relatively easy to be around at a time when the lighting is good and get a good photograph. All available growing land is used. The local people, if I just explain that the Spitty Valley is about 50, 60 miles long, and there's about it's about 12,000 people that live there now, and they are, to look at them, they look Tibetan, they don't look Indian. They are Tibetan Buddhist. They and they practice their religion without any interference from the government or from China. So you can understand why people that had visited Tibet wanted to go visit this area. As I say, subsistence farmers, all available growing land is used, and traditional farming techniques are practiced. The main crops are barley, which they roast and grind into sampa, very fine sort of flour, which they mix with yogurt as a sort of a breakfast or sustainable. Yeah, they have cows as well, livestock, goats, sheep, and actually zoos mainly, which are a cross between a cow and a yak. And here you see local farmer ploughing the fields all by hand. I've actually been there when I've seen metal workers actually repairing one of the ploughs. It's quite interesting. Very primitive, but it works. The field size is quite small. I don't think I've ever seen a tractor there at all, so it's all done by hand. The other crop that they have, as well as barley and also lentils as well, is peas. And peas are a cash crop. Some enterprising traders from Delhi, they get in a lorry that go all the way up there. The people have planted the peas. They get down to market in Delhi in the space of about 2 or 3 days. So fresh Himalayan peas for the restaurants in Delhi command quite a high price. Now you can see the old pea stalks being carried by the women, and they're stored for winter fodder on top of the houses, along with wood kindling for the fires. Typical houses, if you've been to Tibet, very Tibetan style, very thick walls made from stone foundations and rammed earth, which is the local earth, compressed. Small windows, flat roofs because most of the time it doesn't rain. As I say, I've seen when there has been snow, they very quickly clear the snow off the roofs. Again, small communities. You are getting a few houses, a few buildings with the odd corrugated roof, but that's about all. During all my visits there, as I said, the people are extremely hospitable. You're always invited into people's houses and to have tea. And that could be yak butter tea or just regular tea, and biscuits or sampa and yogurt. And that's sort of a typical kitchen, living room and bedroom. It's the main room of the house. And you've got a small wood burning stove there which everything is cooked on. There's always a kettle on for tea. And you see the rugs on the floor. We can come to these later because they do get washed every now and then. But that's where people sit on the floor, and that's where people sleep. And in winter, it keeps you warm. The houses generally are warm in winter and cool in summer because of the thick walls. Give you an example. That is the sink and the bathroom. In the corner here, you can see a big blue tank or receptacle, and that will have been water will have been carried from the spring to fill that, and then all the pots are washed in the sink and then drain away. The actual toilet, it's a dry composting toilet, I think you could call it that. On the 2-story houses, the animals are usually kept in the basement and the ground floor, certainly overwintered in the ground floor. And actually all the human waste, if you like, toilet waste and the animal waste is composted and then back onto the fields to fertilise. Also, in every kitchen, as you've come across, there's always a proud display of all the kitchen utensils and all the crockery. It's how the women like to show off. There's also, if you can see on the bottom there on the shelves, always 2 or 3 pressure cookers being used. Because we're at altitude, as I say, at least 10,000 feet, they use pressure cookers to get things like lentils, etc., cooked in a reasonable time. Also in the middle, you can see next to the post holding the roof up, is the utensil that they use to make the yak butter tea. And so it's just like a plunger with like a leather washer. And so it's tea and yak butter and milk. And yeah, it tastes very similar to sort of Marmite, but a bit different. And hot water, of course. I had that a number of times. If I can just talk briefly about one of the customs that they have. Around about this time of the year, actually it's called New Year Festival, is called Losa, and in the Spitty Valley that actually happens in the full moon at the end of November. Historically it happens then because the kings that ruled the kingdom used to travel maybe from the Nepal region or from Tibet, and so to celebrate Losa with the Spiti people, they did that at the end of November, whereas in the rest of Tibet they do it in, I think it's January, February time, again the full moon. So I've been in the Spitty Valley twice when we've had the New Year festival. And just to go through what they go, first of all the men gather together and they forming sort of special food for the animals, all their animals, from sampa, roasted and ground barley, and it's formed with butter and water, and then it's left to dry, and then it's fed to the animals. We came across this gentleman feeding his goats. And that's what they do first of all. There's also some very much large communal cooking and a lot of partying as well. The festival takes place over sort of like a two-week period. Everybody gets involved, very strong sense of community in all the villages, and people will actually travel back to their home village for these festivals. Special dumplings, loads of women gathering together to make special dumplings to eat as a group. Now, the religious ceremony, it actually predates Buddhism in part, and the village that I was staying in, Mane village, and I've stayed there quite a few times, it's actually attached to, every village is attached to a monastery, and Mane village is attached to Danka, Gompa, or monastery. And if I can just point it, I'm not sure if you can see it, but that is the monastery. It's in a very precarious position, but it's actually at the confluence of two valleys. You've got the Spitty Valley and the Pin Valley, and a lot of the monasteries, in fact, most of the ones I've come across in the Spitty Valley, they tended to, well, they're all in strategic locations, and I think the monastery has followed on from a fort. Anyway, Danka Gompa, and I was in the Danka village with my friends from Mane. The monks descend from the Gompa in their full regalia. The group are part of the Spitty Valley. They're part of the Yellow Hat sect of Buddhism. There's a Red Hat sect and the Yellow Hat sect. But they do still revere the Dalai Lama, who actually visits every couple of years actually as well. But there's much religious music with the horns and the drums. All the village people are there with their best clothes. And this is on sort of like a village playing field, football pitch, flat area where they're used for ceremonies. The monks have these, where the senior monks wear these masks that represent various spirits and devils and etc. New Year is or the New Year celebration is a time for paying your debt, saying thanks, and saying goodbye to the old year and welcoming in the new year. And the way that they do it, and it's quite interesting, if you can see, this is the head monk, and he's carrying something, and you've got a little effigy of a human, and you've also got an effigy which is sort of a Buddhist symbol. So I'll just go back. And what happened, well, this has happened a couple of times. I've done it in the small village and I've done it at the Gompa. This is passed round everybody who's gathered there, and it takes some time. And you put a hair or a nail clipping or something off your body. Usually it's a hair, and you put it into this box, and that is a part of you from the old year. Then this is, yeah, okay, everybody's there, including the young monks as well. Every household, in terms of land ownership, land can be owned by men or women, but usually the firstborn inherits. The secondborn, and usually the secondborn son, enters the monastery, and that carries on. Although women have equal status, and there are nuns as well in monasteries. More blessings. And finally, that effigy and the bit with everybody's bits of hair in, and also a much bigger effigy, sculpture, are then thrown finally on, after all the prayers, onto a big fire and destroyed. And that is the end of the old year and the start of the new. That wipes the slate clean, which I think is quite a nice way to go about it. Back in the household, my hosts, they've got their best clothes on. Every house, as well as that kitchen, living room, etc., and has a house temple. And very rarely you get to go into them. I've only been into this one twice, and as I say, I visited this house 10 times. And there are yak butter candles, incense burners. They're giving offerings to the Buddha, saying prayers. They put little markings. You see reverse swastika and little markings of yak butter above every door opening, closing, above every lintel in the house as well. And there's also a spirit offering given. The women of the village, they visit the apothecary on New Year's Day, or the equivalent of New Year's Day. They go with their young children. Western medicine is used, but it's sort of like as a last resort after having visited the apothecary. And all the women are there gathered with their offerings of a special bread, which is all specially decorated from each household in the village, and also bottles of spirit for him as well. You can see he's got the place of honor, and he's silhouetted against the window there. But he would, at that meeting, he talks about the old year and about the new year and about looking after everybody and good nutrition and looking after themselves and just being careful. I was quite privileged to be actually to go to that. Back in the house, special foods are prepared for the home. This was in the basement, or next door to the animals, and there was deep fat fryer of the original kind, and there's sort of like little deep fried pastry twizzles, I can say, and these are just made for their new year. And it takes hours. They also decide, because they regard it as spring, it's a bit like, I don't know about you, but I had a lovely spring day here. Strong sun. They always have strong sun there in the winter and in the summer as well, very little cloud. But it's a good time for a spring clean. So those rugs, which they've mostly been hand woven by the women of the household, those rugs are all brought out. The ones that they sleep and eat on, they're brought out and they're washed and given a good clean. You see a woman using an adze here to give it a good clean. and they're left out to dry, and they're dried probably by freeze drying. The humidity will be very low, and yeah, they dry in the sun quite quickly, so it's a good time to do it. And also they're not doing any field work. All their time is spent producing food to eat, and when they're not producing food to eat, they're partying in the winter months. So that's how they do it. A typical Gompa during the summer, just to give you an idea, because we didn't get into that Danka monastery. This is Key Monastery. Again, this is the main monastery for the whole Spitty Valley, and that is where the religious leader for the whole Spitty Valley resides. Again, if you've been to Tibet, a typical Tibetan style building, religious building. And the Buddhist structures, which are beautiful and intricate, and the monks, always very welcoming, and yeah, no, it's good to see them. Now for the wildlife. As I said, I was going there not specifically for the wildlife, but these are some of the things that I saw along the way. Yellow-billed chough, which occurs in the mountains of Western Pakistan and the Himalayas. It looks awful, with the red legs, awfully like an alpine chough. And it's actually eating something that I think that the monks had donated or given to it there. Himalayan poppies, and yeah, okay, only on one occasion when I've been in the summertime have I seen Himalayan poppies. These are about 20 centimeters tall, that's all, but they look absolutely stunning in the very clear, clean atmosphere. The petals are almost crystal-like. The picture doesn't do it justice. Some other flowers that I saw, Himalayan balsam, again, only about 20 centimeters tall, but very recognizable as our Himalayan balsam, but quite different because of the arduous conditions that they live through. Now then, the quest for the snow leopard. So I'm roundabout on my first journey there second journey there in 2006. I came across in the Spitty Valley, in a village called Mud, there is actually in their main temple in that village, they have there's a very small, young, stuffed snow leopard in the temple for some reason, hanging from the ceiling. So you get talking to the local people and he says, oh yeah, there's loads of snow leopards. They come into our villages during the winter. They come after the livestock, and sometimes there's problems and we have to kill them because, you know, they're damaging our livestock. They have an insurance government scheme whereby basically if you've lost livestock, you can claim the money back for it, for the livestock from the government. Anyway, in 2008, journeyed again this winter time, and we the lady that set up the charity that led the first trip in 1993 with us, her and myself, we always wanted to see a snow leopard. We'd read the Peter Mathiasen book on the snow leopard, where of course he never sees one, but we went specifically for to see the snow leopard. So the village I'm staying in is the one that you can see in the distance. That is Mani village, and we've walked up to a high lake and a high mountain area where the locals know that there are snow leopards. That is actually a very small portable hide, but the two of us slept in there and a November night, and it was absolutely freezing. We had two guides with us as well. Needless to say, we didn't see anything because we made so much noise and we were only there for one night. We took up a leg of a sheep and as bait, of course, we trained our cameras on it and we sat and waited and nothing happened. Before that, we actually went with the local. and we split up into twos, and he said, you go down that side and we'll go down this side and we'll look for the snow leopard. Meanwhile, I think the snow leopard's on the mountains looking at us. But you go look for the snow leopards and you'll come across caves, and have a look in any sort of caves or holes under rocks. And actually, we did. We went off and we had a walking stick each and a camera to go see snow leopards in the wild. And we did actually see caves with bits of fur, bits of bone, obviously something living in there, but had gone by the time we got there. Thank God we didn't actually see them. That's all I can say. How naive were we? Anyway, on the way down from that first adventure, we see snow leopard tracks that are actually over hours on the path. We were the only people that went up there, and then there was a snow leopard track in the sort of the muddy, shaly soil. And the local people, yeah, they can spot the tracks, and it was pointed out to us. It's not very clear, but it was snow leopard tracks over hours, so they knew they were around, and we'd missed them. We also spotted fresh snow leopard scat or droppings, again on the path that we'd walked up the day before, and that's a very small camera case, just to give you an idea of scale. I didn't have a rule with me. But I've checked, and yeah, it's snow leopard scat, and it was fresh, relatively fresh. I didn't bring that home. I should have done, but never mind. So that was the first visit. The second visit, in the meantime, what had happened? Actually, we got back from that first visit, and it was the New Year's. That was just prior to the New Year celebration. And we're sat talking to the locals through an interpreter, and they said, where have you been? We've been camping. These people want to go see snow leopard. And she says, one came through our village the other day. And it's like, can't believe it. You go all the way into the mountain and go really remote, and one came into the village, the next village. So it was sat there sharing tea. So this was always happening. Anyway, the next time decided to go was January 2016 into a village called Kibba, which is at 14,000 feet. And it snowed actually just after we arrived. Again, it's myself and Joan Pollock, the lady who set up the charity. We're doing some sort of charity work, but basically trying to see the snow leopards. And we know that the head of the Snow Leopard Trust has his headquarters and house in this village, and we know that there's meant to be plenty of guides, etc. So it's arranged through a local. We stay with him, we have a good guide, and we go, and we stay there for a full week at 14,000 feet in January. This is the accommodation. That's the room, again with the stove, two of us in there. That's the bed, that's where we eat, sleep, drink, everything. The bathroom is downstairs, and it's just the hole in the floor toilet. I didn't wash for a week. The temperature outside, it's quite cold. I've got no idea. I think it was, minus 10 to minus 15, 20. The transport, we did have two ponies at one point, but one of them actually decided to run off. So that's fine, that's what they do. To get from where we're staying in the village to where the best place to see the snow leopards, and for some reason, I thought, because I do wildlife stuff in the UK and other places in the world actually, I thought there'd be transport, like a jeep, and I thought there'd be a hide. Anyway, there wasn't. So we had to walk out of the village uphill from 14,000 feet. And if you've ever done anything like that, it's quite hard work. It's like 3 or 4 steps and then stop, 3 or 4 steps and stop. The locals are very good, and they're very patient with us, let's say. Joan is about 15 years older than me, so I deferred, and she went on the pony and I walked. Thank heavens I took my snow boots with me. I'm wearing everything that I've got to try and keep warm. Everybody is, apart from the locals. Anyway, you trek uphill to find the best position to see the snow leopards, and you get into position, and it's open. There are no hides, there is no cover, there's no protection. And actually, between you and me, if there were any snow leopards, they've seen us, they've heard us like half an hour before we got there, and they've gone somewhere else, or they're sat in their cave looking at us. There were blizzards. John and I were there. We'd elected to go for a full week. And the locals wanted to give us value for money. So we're out in these open, windswept blizzard conditions for a full week, for about 5 hours a day, 5 or 6 hours a day. A little man would appear at lunchtime with a pressure cooker with a hot meal. Well, it was hot when it left the village. He would turn up with a flask of tea and a pressure cooker of food, and that was the break at lunchtime. I remember at one point just walking round in circles and waving my arm because I was getting so cold. But there was no way either of us were going to say, we can't do this anymore, we're going back. We're not bothered about the snow leopards, we'll go back. So what did we see? On day one, actually, and this is taken, this photo, sorry about the funny image, but it's an argali. It's like a Himalayan form of an ibex. I've seen these horns elsewhere on stupas in the Spitty Valley, but I've never seen the animal before. That's actually taken through a bird spotting scope on a tripod, but with my mobile phone camera. I'd not got an attachment for it for my camera, didn't think, because I thought the snow leopard would be right in front of me. Yeah, anyway, so that was good to see. Lammergeier flew over us to have a really good look on one day. I came very, very close. I don't know if you know the lammergeiers, you get them in the Himalayas. They eat carrion, and generally they do this trick where they pick the bones up and drop them from a height to get to the bone marrow. Also Himalayan blue sheep, which are favourite food for the snow leopard. Seen these on a number of occasions. Nice group there, but that was during a summer visit. And the terrain. So what are we looking at when we're trying to see snow leopards? That's the local terrain. These deep chasms and canyons, that's a few hundred feet deep. Because there's no barrier rail, no nothing. Often there's a wind blowing and a gale blowing. And everything is sort of beige and grey and white. And I looked at that side of that canyon for, well, there was about 5 of us looking that day at that side of the canyon to see in a number of these little caves you can see, which is with the sun on the entrance to the cave. And that's a really good spot for a snow leopard to be sitting. And talking to the local guide that is out spotting them all the time for the Snow Leopard Trust, he's actually stood and watched a mound for hours, thinking it was a stone, but thinking it was a snow leopard, not sure, across a canyon like this. And then it would finally get up and move. So that's what you did. But once again, we go back to our normal spot the following day. And what had happened? Snow leopard tracks across our footprints. And it was, the guide said, looking at the tracks, it was a mother and 2 cubs that he knew was in the area. They'd obviously waited until we'd gone and they'd come to investigate. So there we go. It keeps on happening. So do I go again? I don't know. That's the team. And there's at least those people looking for the snow leopards, plus most of the village, and plus another village just down the road who were looking for us. And we actually went because the money that we're paying is going, and tips for the drivers, for the guides, etc. It goes to the local community. Everybody knows about us. They want to see us. They want to feed us. And by this point they know that there's no snow uppers aren't going to turn up, so they're trying to entertain us. So yeah, interesting. But that was the team. So do I go again? I don't know. It was really cold and it was really hard. So I think seriously about going again. But my involvement in the charity, just to round it off, what I've done whilst I've been there, what has been achieved since 1993, and the charity was set up. You can read it all there, but there's a community hospital, there's a school, there's a clinic, there's a new community centre in the main town. There's been about 20 or 30 children that have been sponsored through education, a really good education. If you're a family and you don't have land, then it's really hard to support yourself and you end up in menial jobs. But if you've got an education, you can lift your family out of that. And it's now, the charity is actually basically being run by a local management committee. On that first visit in '93, I've just got a few photos at the end. On that first visit, we took the surgeon who's helped set up the first hospital and that was involved in that first conversation. And he gave a clinic, a medical clinic at a number of the villages that we passed through. And people have been waiting hours to see this doctor, and he's just examining a boy that day. That's the community hospital that we helped support. And just to give you an idea of figures, that actually cost about £50,000 to build the community hospital. On that first trip, we actually took out £2,000, which we'd raised, and various medical supplies. And you can see the walls are just starting to be built. And that was a community hospital in 2006. It's still a small hospital. It's manned by medics that come up from Manali, the main hospital in Manali, and they come up in the summertime. But there is now a government hospital down the valley as well. The local schools back in 1993 were appalling. As I say, the Indian government had annexed, cut off this whole area because of problems with the Chinese back in 60s. And so they'd not invested at all. So we actually invested, where are we, the school, that actually cost £20,000. And that was back in 2003 it was opened. That school is now run and by the Indian government with permanent teachers and caretaker. And a lot of the design, because it's sort of like solar heated, is sort of a conservatory front with a lot of glass to heat it during the winter. And then the schoolrooms are at the north face, and there is some little wood stoves as well. But that design has been copied in quite a few places up and down the valley. And the latest project has been a community centre in Kaza, and that contains accommodation for visiting tourists in the summer, and also a sort of big community hall for the locals to use in the winter. There's a craft shop to sell things to tourists in the summer. And yeah, it's used, and it's also going to be a base for an optician during the year as well, because there's no optician in the whole valley. And that's it. Thank you very much. If you're interested in the charity, that is the website, www.spitty.org. Okay, I'm going to, if you don't mind, what I'll do is I'll show these sketches I've done whilst I've been there, because there's a lot of time waiting and doing nothing. Sorry, Nick, fire away.
The very small Himalayan balsam plants
Yes.
by a little watercourse in Britain, where it's obviously an introduced and rather invasive species along some river valleys. It in the Himalayas, it's not out of control, so to speak. It's it doesn't take over, or
No.
have you any view on that?
No, it's completely kept it. Well, it's almost like a different animal. It's the same, but because of the conditions, as I say, it's much smaller. I've only seen it once. Okay, as you saw, it was by a sort of a small stream. It's not. It's not very frequently seen at all,
No.
and it's not a problem. So
No.
it's just conditions back here allow it to grow tall and strong.
Yeah, and no insect or something that controls it, probably.
No, just the weather. And
Yeah. What about other people would like to ask questions? Jan's going to tell me who you are, and I'll ask you to put your question to Jan if there are some questions.
Nick, it's Janet here. I've not got any questions come in just yet, but can I ask one?
Yeah.
Thank you. You talked, obviously it's a very, very remote area. I just wondered, do they typically get many tourists? Obviously you mentioned sort of religious ones, but I wondered if they got any other tourists, like, for example, you and Joan on your wildlife trip, and leading on from that, do they actually value the wildlife they've got? I know it's obviously a bit sparse because of the terrain, but it'd be nice if they to know whether they did.
Okay. Tourists, the main problem with tourism in the area is that if they have flash floods, this is say during the summer, if they have flash floods, then bridges go, or as you say, roads collapse, etc. So about 10-15 years ago, there was quite a number of adventure travel companies doing tours to the Spitty Valley, doing a circuit, going through Manali and coming back down through Shimla. But a number of these had disastrous events like landslides, missed flights home, etc., etc. So the adventure travel companies stopped doing them. In the meantime, and that was generally tourists in the summer, and tourist groups. You tend to now get more independent tourists in the summer, because there is a regular bus service for the locals to get to the Spitty Valley. It's quite hard travel, but there will always be tourists in India, Indian tourists as well as from around the world. So they will come, but they're in very small groups, couples or small families. So that's in the summer. And there are things like homestays, and actually if you have a look at the charity website, you can hear there's a number of sort of homestays and tours with trekking or whatever you want, going to various villages and various temples, and that's available, and it can be easily organized. In the winter, there was generally no tourists, but because of snow leopards, and word has got out, and people like where are we, Nature Trek, and certainly Nature Trek. I think there's an American company as well. There's a few companies around the world that are offering photographic wildlife holidays to places like Ladakh, the Hemis National Park in Ladakh, and also now to Kibber. And tourists are arriving with big cameras, big lenses, expecting to see snow leopards in winter. Now, since Joan and I went in that last trip, 2016, there are more and more of these winter snow leopard tourists, and to the point where they're actually putting bait out because they're not. There's been a few abortive attempts to take photographs of snow leopards, and you know what photographers are like when they've paid a lot of money and they're going to really quite an extreme place, and it's the journey of a lifetime. They want to see a snow leopard, and we're looking. Joan was trying to impress on the local people, and she'll be going after this coronavirus. There's no travel there at all at the moment. But when the valley opens up again, she plans to talk to the local senior people and the politicians to make sure it's more regulated, because it's getting a bit silly. But the good thing is that the conditions are quite harsh, so there's not going to be busloads of people. And the snow leopards have got a large area to go to, so they just don't turn up. So, that answer your question?
Yes, it does. Thank you very much, Janet.
All right.
Nick, Jane Orton's, I think, wants to ask a question.
Welcome, Jane. You're a new person, and we'd love to hear your question.
Hi there. I was just saying thank you for having me, and Julie, Janet. Really interesting talk. I've worked in Spiti myself as well for the last.
All right, brilliant.
Yeah, so I was there. I mean, nothing like the length of time you've been there, but from 2015 to 2018. And my question really was about the change that you'd seen there over the time that you've been visiting, because I know just in the few years since I've been going there, just 2015 to 2018, I mean, just the impact of tourism has actually been quite stark. New roads, even the bridge being finished from Kirby to Chichen. I was terrified of the old way of getting across because it was that basket thing. And
yeah, been there, done that.
I was a real wuss about it. So I think a lot of the changes are positive, but in particular, toilets are actually quite a negative thing because of putting in flushing toilets. And my friends maybe you'll probably know them, Curran and Kim in Kaza.
Yeah.
They've been making a documentary on the impact of tourism in toilets and the use of flushing toilets. So I know, just like I say, in a few years, things have changed a lot. But I'm thinking since the 90s, and particularly my question was about winter, because I've never actually been to Spiti in winter. Have the winters changed very much in the time that you've been going there?
You mean in terms of the climate
or
tourism?
In terms of the culture. So in the house that I was staying in, for example, the little boys were obsessed with American wrestling, and that was the winter entertainment. And I actually had to pay people to come and sing, because I was recording songs from the area. I had to actually kind of really look around to try and get people to come and perform songs that would be sung just as entertainment during the winter. I think possibly they still do it, but I'm just wondering, in terms of life changing in the area, becoming more accessible in the time that you've been visiting.
Yeah, generally, it's sort of like their saving grace was the inaccessibility during the winter, because the tourists wouldn't come, and so they could go back to their regular way of community life and parties and birthdays and celebrations. Yes, because the problem with all the new roads and the bridges and everything is because we're right, as you know, we're right on the China border. It's of strategic importance that the Indian Army can get to the border regions really quickly, and that's why they've invested so much in the roads. And you probably know from talking to the local people, they know that the Chinese have been trying to, there's been minor incursions, local sort of seeing people turn up in villages in wintertime or in summer, and they're obviously from China because they don't come from Spiti. I knowing the local people, I can imagine. I mean, everybody's got satellite TV, and every time I've been there, the satellite TV's been going, and they love the cricket. They love watching the TV's on all the time, and kids will be watching the TV. But also, and I don't know, you need to really, the community really needs to sort of trust you and invite you. I've been to ceremonies I don't know if you know, but when the new baby's born, they don't celebrate. They wait until it's a year old, and it's like a naming ceremony. And I've only been to one of those once. it's a big party. Everybody from the family arrives from all over the area, and they'll travel for days to get there. You're all entertained to a meal. You all go to the house at a certain time and have a meal. And then it was to the community centre, or what they have as a community centre. And the family are there. You give a gift of money. The baby's there. And there is dancing, and there is singing, and there are local people, and there's music. Now, you just need to be in the right place at the right time when it's happening. And those sorts of traditions, and that was where I'm at. That was on my last visit, actually. So quite recently. It still carries on. And the fact, people can get from Shimla, and you can get into the Spitty Valley via that road from the east, and that's the main access road for the army. They can get there in the winter, but it's still a really horrendous journey. So there's not going to be that many tourists there. So it'd be interesting to talk to you outside this talk about experiences in Spiti.
Yeah, I'd love to. Actually, they're talking about making a museum, which I think might be on hold at the minute. But I'm not sure, because I think there's quite a few people working for NCF that want to get a Spiti museum made in Kaza.
Yeah.
It'd be really good to work more with the community, but because there's kind of quite a few people based all around India, and then obviously people based in Europe as well, that what's hard at the minute is, I think it should be community led, but then if other people are going to be involved, it's coordinating it in a pandemic where no one can actually go, and I guess putting it all together. But maybe it's something for the future. I know, just as a point of interest, that the way they've handled the coronavirus has been really distinct in terms of different levels of the community.
Yeah.
And decision making. There's a lot of interesting conversations to be had, actually.
Yeah. I've heard that they're going through immunisations as well at the same time as us. I believe at the moment.
It's really interesting. I think my instinct is that I'm afraid of change, and it's not my community to sort of be protective of. I find that quite a difficult thing, because there are a lot of these conversations, I guess, kind of being sparked by tourism, and I suppose it's quite a scary thing when you find a community that you think is very special, and then you see it change so quickly. So I suppose my question was really, has the change accelerated so much just in the last few years, or has it been this ongoing thing?
No, it's been going on. I think from 93, when I got there in 93, there'd been very little change, because the place was closed. You couldn't get there, and so there was no input. But the people were almost medieval at that point, and medieval health conditions, and you can't really stop change. But what you can do is make sure that they've got the wherewithal to manage their way forward. And you can't begrudge them having a TV and having mobiles and WhatsApp groups. I know there's a child that I sponsor in one of the small villages, and Lalong, and he's in a WhatsApp group, so that's fine.
And just if you don't mind me having another question, just because you mentioned the snow leopard incentive, the insurance schemes, and you also mentioned the villagers saying, sometimes we'll have to kill the snow leopards anyway. This is something that I've really been trying to find out, is just in terms of the effectiveness of insurance schemes in terms of attitudes of people, because I've heard so many stories about snow leopards that I keep hearing over and over again. People think that it drinks, if a snow leopard gets into the animals, it drinks the blood of the livestock. And the wildlife biologists from the NCF just keep telling me they hear this story over and over again, that locals are saying it drinks blood. And in terms of where this kind of perception comes from, I'm not sure, but it seems to be a consistent one.
Yeah.
It seems like they're a valuable resource because they're a tourist resource. But then I'm not sure about the impact on attitudes, because even if the story of Milarepa, the Tibetan saint who turns into a snow leopard. When I ask about that story, they tell me the version without the snow leopard in it because there was a movie made about it, and the Dalai Lama endorsed the script, and that didn't happen to have the snow leopard. So the snow leopard's not even kind of associated with that story, and in other parts of the Himalayas it is.
Yeah.
So it's really interesting you say, because you said it in parallel. You said that the locals had showed you the or there was a stuffed snow leopard somewhere, and they'd said,
yeah, it's in mud. It's in the sort of temple in Mud village in the Spitty Valley where it was.
I think there's one in comic as well, actually.
Yeah.
But I think so. My question is, do you think these insurance schemes are they seen separately from the question of conserving snow leopards? Like, are they, oh great, we don't have to, snow leopards are seen as valuable and they're valuable to us culturally, so we don't have to kill them, thank goodness, because of the insurance schemes, we're protected? Or is it, great, we've got the insurance, but also we might have to kill the snow leopard?
No, usually they kill the snow leopard either in self-defense. I've talked to a couple of people where actually, I mean, these animals are in their, their cattle, and they go after ponies, they go after cattle, goats and sheep and everything, and they're in the, if you like, the ground floor of your house, and then a snow leopard will get in there and have a field day and kill 2 or 3, and the local will find out, because there's, find out this is happening, go in there and try and defend his animals. And sometimes a snow leopard is injured in trying to defend. They haven't got guns. They hit it with a spade or a mattock or something. But in the meantime, they've got, I mean, the guy that I've spent a lot of time with, he used to have 3 or 4 ponies. They've all gone. And it's been, they either go when they're out on the summer pastures and they just disappear, or they're killed. The government, if you like, compensation, not insurance, it's a compensation scheme. You can get money for livestock that is lost rather than trying to kill the snow leopard. So there's no, if you like, retaliation and searching after a snow leopard that has killed your animal. You will be paid by the government at some point. It's bureaucratic and it will take ages. But I did, it was some years ago, and I'm trying to think, it'll be about 10 years ago, talked to a guy in Demel, and he was educating the children. He worked for the Snow Leopard Trust, and he was educating the children in environmental concerns and caring for the wildlife, and he'd got remote cameras showing them snow leopards, taking them out for picnics in the summer. So there's a big education program going on as well, which is possibly, when you go again, it's worth maybe linking into that and asking.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jane, and thanks, Janet. So, Nick, do you want to? I've not got any other questions.
No,
on the list.
I'll sum up. Yeah. Wonderful to listen to you both talking about the snow leopards and all the questions that Jane has asked. I'm going to ask Andy if he'd give the vote of thanks for our wonderful talk.
Hi, Jan. First of all, I wish I had your energy and sense of adventure, I have to say. The photos are incredible. I think you really captured that immensity of that landscape with the little precarious villages and monasteries and so on. And I think that what came across as well is just the admiration and respect you've got for the people there, and how they managed to carve out an existence out there in a tough environment, and also how contented and resilient they seem to be, despite all that, bearing in mind that we can't live without cinemas and the Costa drink for a few months as well. So maybe something we could learn from. I think the charity work is fantastic. I wouldn't be too downhearted about the snow leopard. I've been to Twycross twice and not found one, let alone in that lane. I think sometimes those animals retain that mystique because they're so hard to find, and perhaps it's better in a way that we don't find them. And you've got a perfect reason if you do decide to go again to go. But brilliant again, beautiful photos, fantastic talk. really enjoyed it. So thank you very much.
No, thank you for letting me share.
I'm hoping that you've enjoyed this evening, and perhaps you'll be able to join us again on the Tuesday, the 16th of March, the same time. James Lovett, who looks after Beacon Hill, is going to talk to us about Beacon Hill, past, present and future. That's on the 16th of March, and we'll send you all details, and I will endeavour to keep up with new people who want to come in and try and make sure you get all the details as well. Thank you once again, Jan and Andy, and good night, everybody, and hope to see you again soon.